as someone who firmly believes in supporting marriage and is happily married, I also don't believe it's for everybody. And I would not recommend anybody in this cultural context marry unless they are doing so for spiritual reasons as a covenant to the Most High. I want to break down what was said, because I think there's just, although I think he was very respectful of trying not to like go into a lot of detail, there's still things that we can glean in the things that were not said.
We haven't talked about is your current marriage and your current situation. And I think it would be unfair to you to not address that in this space where we're being really open and honest.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the details of anything.
Right.
But if you've done all of this work and you
notice that really open and honest, but no details. Like there's no details. It's clearly not open and honest. And it's important to know we don't truly know what went on. All we have is speculation. Now, Jeannie Mai, I think, is just a lot more vocal and just a lot more open about her side of things. And so we can piece things together. But no one truly knows what happened behind closed doors. And that is always the mystery of these celebrity relationships. It's always hard to know, is this true love? Just a contract, and the contract ran out? Like, no one ever fully knows.
You've given yourself that grace. And you've given yourself that space to grow, and you've given yourself permission to love self, right? Then what happens when a man gets to the point where they're just like, okay, I'm filing for divorce?
So here's the thing I'm automatically noticing about this conversation. And I hear this a lot, right? You know, loving myself, self-love, taking care of myself. And there is obviously a valid component to that. But when you get into a marriage, the emphasis is no longer your own self-love. It's no longer your own self-care. It is the love and the care of that union of both parties, of both people. And so something that I hear a lot of the time is people going into marriages now trying to create a union with other people, but still making it about their own self-love or making it about their own self-happiness. And I'm like, if you're joining with another person, it's no longer you or him, it's we, it's both of you guys. And when somebody gets married, but they still have a single mindset, that is a recipe for disaster. And both people cannot be in the marriage insisting on their own rights and insisting on their own way. If that happens, then it's going to be World War III every single day.
Integrity intact. I could never say anything that would not honor somebody.
Also, shout out to him. Shout out to him for the midst of all that's happened. We don't fully know the story of him still trying to be honoring and respectful to the mother of his kid. I hats off to him for that.
Absolutely.
But I can tell you that this has not been a easy journey.
Right.
I can tell you that I'm saddened. I can tell you that I'm disappointed. I can tell you that I'm uneasy, right? But again, like, God has put me in a different path, and that path is going to entail for me to take care of myself.
So to me, this statement was interesting. Now, I don't know what God he professes to serve or believe in or whatever. Now, if he's referring to the God of the Bible, that God in the Bible actually hates divorce. Hates it. It literally says it. He says, I hate divorce. It is not his heart. There are some rarities, right, where it says that divorce is valid in the case of infidelity or something like that. But all in all, God honors covenant. His heart is to honor covenant. His heart is to redeem and to restore relationships and marriages. Now, with that said, I don't know the full situation. I don't know all the things that were done behind closed doors, so I can't fully say either or. But what I do want to make it clear is that sometimes people will make decisions and say that God did it or God didn't do it. This is a general trend that I will see that people do in general, right? They'll make their own decisions. The decision may not go the way that they wanted. And then once they're experiencing the repercussions of it, then now they're inviting God into it. And I'm like, let's just not get into the habit of blaming God for our own decisions. What we do know is that the God of the Bible does not like divorce. There are some situations where divorce is allowed, i.e. in the case of infidelity, but outside of that, God honors and values covenant, because the covenant between man and woman is so important in his eyes that it literally represents Christ's love to the church. That's how important, that's how sacred it is. God's heart, his desire is never that people divorce just because they couldn't love each other. Like that's not his desire. Is that through the union, through the marriage, that their love actually for one another would literally reflect the love that Christ had for his people. I want to make it clear that although divorce happens, people get together, things don't work out, doesn't mean that God was in that. It doesn't mean that that was God's will. God will never break his own covenant that goes against his own character.
And to love myself and to be in the best situation that I can thrive as someone who's been through all the things that I've been through.
It's kind of something you can't explain.
Yeah, you can't. The real thing is like, I don't like to fail in anything.
Me either.
I don't
want to lose. I don't want to fail.
I don't want to fail, especially when I know what
you've poured in.
Right. And, as I sit across from you, like I can only be responsible for myself.
True.
And I can only do what I can do.
I really appreciate the fact that, again, he's taking a responsibility for himself. I don't see him throwing his ex-wife under the bus or anything. He's just like, look, I'm trying to prioritize my well-being, trying to prioritize me getting myself together. I'm disappointed. I don't like losing, but I essentially lost this. And so I can acknowledge and appreciate the fact that in this whole entire interview, at least up to this point, he's been really respectful.
Right. And I can't expect someone else to do what I'm doing.
But did you go to therapy with her?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Right.
So you actually addressed it,
right.
Tried to work through it, tried to do the work, and it just was like not happening.
I wonder, and this is where I'm always curious of the process going up into a marriage, because I highly recommend premarital counseling if anybody who was considering getting married, and ideally premarital counseling from people who have been married for a long time, who have a very strong spiritual understanding of marriage, along with the practical understanding of marriage. Highly recommend it. Because when I got married, when we were going through premarital counseling, they were dealing with some real stuff. I had two different pastors who counseled me in my premarital counseling, and it was very difficult. That whole season was very difficult, and yet I'm really grateful because I think me and my husband really were able to start off on the right foot because we worked through a lot of the kinks beforehand. Now, of course, there's certain things you can never fully prepare for, but I'm just saying I do think it's important to have good, strong premarital counseling beforehand, so hopefully you can figure out those deal breakers before you decide to go down the aisle. But for those who didn't think to do that for whatever reason and find themselves in the situation, it's still, all hope isn't lost. But just because somebody goes to therapy, there still has to be a willingness to change. And he's not saying it, but what it sounds like is that while they went to therapy, there were some things that were not willing to change. We don't fully know what it was. We don't fully understand because we won't always know all of the details. But what I can say emphatically is that if two single people get married and they still hold on to a single mindset, that relationship is destined to fail. You can't be in a relationship with somebody and want to make it about yourself and your own happiness first. That undermines the whole purpose of marriage. The goal, hopefully, is that you and that person could find a sense of happiness and well-being that works for both of you, and it will likely require compromise. It'll likely require you giving up some certain ideas or changing your thought process about certain things. But that can be a beautiful process, but there has to be a willingness to grow, evolve, and sacrifice certain things.
Well, then you tried. Yeah. I don't know about for you, but for me, it is a switch.
Right.
And when that switch
goes
off,
that was your switch?
Go on. Yeah.
Right.
But I had to realize for myself that anything that happened in the last, what was it, year and a half of my life, that shouldn't have nothing to do with me.
And that's my
That didn't
point
have
of case.
anything to do with me. I was not embarrassed.
Right.
The way that Black people stood up for me and the way that Black women were like, oh no, you don't do that to her. I was shocked because I didn't realize that what I had done or what I've done in my career had so much impact.
So that part was interesting. I had nothing to do with the failure of my relationship. That was an interesting comment. I personally firmly believe that anytime a relationship fails, it is the fault of both parties. It's the fault of both parties. Now, that doesn't mean that, in her case, that does not mean that she was responsible for the guy cheating. Like, no, he ultimately, he decided to cheat. He decided to step out of the relationship, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, because relationships are made up of two broken people, there's usually an area of opportunity where both parties can improve. Now, one might be more guilty than the other. One might be way more off than the other. But usually, if we're honest, there's always areas of improvement. That's just my personal opinion. But so I think it's important again to understand and recognize what marriage is really about. And I think it's also important to remember that if two people get into a marriage and there was not this understanding that you can no longer prioritize your own happiness and your own well-being above the other person, it's going to be really hard to become one. It's going to be really hard to find that union, because marriage, it requires compromise, it requires sacrifice, and it likely means that there's going to be some ideas, maybe some expectations, maybe even some dreams that you're going to have to modify. It doesn't mean you lose yourself. It just means that your idea and your dreams evolve as you are now building a life with somebody else. And that can be a very beautiful thing. And I think it can be a very rewarding thing, but it requires a level of selflessness that I think, quite frankly, not everybody's really used to. And this is why I firmly believe that having marriage as a covenant between a man and a woman and God is integral and is really important to its success. Because if marriage just becomes about what I can get out of it and how I can fulfill my own needs, then I'm going to find a reason to not be happy. He didn't hug me the way I wanted him to. He put on some weight. He's not making enough money. Like there can be 50 reasons that I'm not happy. And then it can be easy for me to want a divorce, right? But if I recognize, like, okay, this is not just about my happiness. This is about the vow and commitment I made to God and what I believe this is going to mean for my family long term. Like, if the marriage becomes greater than just my own personal happiness in that moment, there's a greater reason, there's a greater purpose, then I think it's going to be easier to ride through those kinks and then maybe even be willing to adjust. But anyways, those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree to disagree? Let me know. Leave your questions, comments, concerns in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later. Bye.